as a society, I think if you are able to alleviate the context of the most vulnerable, then you are like inherently enhancing the quality of society as a whole. And you can see people you knew, friends losing their jobs. You do put things into perspective. In the case of Mexico, a lot of Latin American countries, when it comes to migration, when it economy, there's a lot of lines that are very blurry because it's informal and it's formal, it's irregular and it's regular, it's all the same. It's a very, very good exercise to relax. I think it's like the ultimate yoga experience.
Welcome to Keeping Up with the SASIs. On this podcast, we uncover the projects, challenges, failures, and successes of sustainability and social innovators. I'm Juan Pablo Grimaldi, your host for today, and this is our first episode, and we have the pleasure of being joined by a special guest. She's a migration expert, a human rights specialist, a painter, a freediver, a part-time expat, and a lifelong optimist. Carmen Pedraza, welcome to the show.
Hello, Juan Pablo. Thank you so much for having me here.
I'm real glad. How are you doing?
Good, all good. Enjoying the weird summer weather in Paris.
Are you normally based here or you're traveling all over the world?
It's a funny story because I do work for a European-based organization that recently sent me back to Mexico, where I'm from, but that has now once again pulled me back to Europe. So officially based in France again, though I do work from home. So I can live the digital nomad life, but I choose not to. I'm a very homey person.
Okay, sounds good. If I'm not mistaken, you currently work for the Institute of Human Resources and Business. You are part of the team of the Migrant Workers Program in North America as regional coordinator. The first thing when I see this long title is how important was for your job application to be a migrant and to be from North America?
No, that's a very good question actually, and I think it's one of the tricky parts I would say, because sometimes a downside or sometimes there's an upside of working for a non-profit organization, in which it's a non-profit, you know, organization, so things are pretty much. It can feel sometimes that things are made up because there are very specific tasks in the non-profit sector, which also plays good for funding applications. I'm not gonna lie, especially when the job gets done. But long story short, and answering to your question, honestly, it wasn't directly linked because I entered the organization as a communications officer for the migrant workers program. But then I feel like I had to work for the role of regional coordinator for North America, meaning I saw the role and it wasn't even open. It was taken by someone else, but I did think to myself, that's the role that I want. So I basically worked for it for 2 years until I got it. And of course, that it played to my favor the fact that I'm Mexican, and the migration corridor in the North American case is basically Mexicans coming to the US. To say it's entrenched in our history. Yeah, this has a lot also because my expertise before coming to France and before entering the institute for IHRB to make it easier, to make it less long. It was working with migrant communities in the US, so that helped a lot. But my background as a bachelor's, I did communications, so that's how I started and worked my way into regional coordinator, which is more stakeholder engagement.
I see. Congratulations on getting a job that you never thought you wanted to do. And touching on what you mentioned on how you built your career, like, can you tell us where did all first started? Where did you find your passion and said, I want to work in this topic?
It's a funny story because I always say or often say that I work somehow better towards my goals because of this qualification than because I know exactly what I want to do. So, I mean, try to make the long story short, I guess it all started because I, I wanted to do cinema as a bachelor's. So I started in communications because I also didn't want to risk it and study cinema because I wanted to make sure that I had something to eat in the future. So I started communication, but then I realized that there's a difference between liking movies and actually making them. So I ended up changing my liking in reading communications to journalism. But then in Mexico, as you know, that can be a very complex profession because of violence, basically as a journalist. So I ended up doing what I thought I would like the least within communications, which was
Mm-hmm.
organizational communications. But I mean, the reason why I wanted to become a journalist
Yeah.
was because when you're this young person and want to change the world. Not that I don't want to change the world still, but I'm no longer that young person, I guess. Um, I I managed to get the closest to what I want to write about as a journalist, which are these, stories of vulnerable people that needs like in which the context needs to change, not them, for them to improve their situations. So I ended up doing organizational communications for Adult International as my first job.
Yeah.
And then I realized to my surprise that it was a horrible environment, but horrible.
In what
You
way?
know, I mean, Amnesty International is famous already for having like really bad work culture. In Mexico was an exception. But what I did end up making there was a really good group of friends because we were all in the same, I guess, disappointment. And I also think, and this is gonna sound bad, but one of the things that glues people the most is to have a common enemy. So I guess
Yeah.
we were very glued because we have Amnesty International Mexico as a strong common enemy. Uh, but in any case, I mean, um, then after Amnesty International, we all kind of drifted off to try to look for these alternatives to change the world that weren't necessarily fitted into activism.
Mm-hmm.
So within Amnesty and honestly since the bachelor, I did work with migrants in Mexico because then again trying to look for the stories of the most vulnerable the ways I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Not to victimize them, but I do see them like a good reflection of society. I mean, if you, as a society, I think if you are able to alleviate the context of the most vulnerable, then you are like inherently enhancing the quality of society as a whole. That's what I mean whenever I mention vulnerable people. But
Mm-hmm.
anyways, that profile in Mexico, I found them in the migrant community. I don't think, and there are a lot of, you know, I guess, the stats about it that can argue my statement, which is that I am very much convinced that one of the worst places on earth is that of a migrant trying to cross through Mexico to the United States. Uh, we are sadly very, very good at violating all sorts of human rights, and as non-rights holders, which is the state of a refugee or a irregular migrant, then you're just becoming a victim of all sorts of kind of human rights violations. Um, and then that pushed me to work with migrant communities through another organization that was sustained by a private foundation. So I went away a little bit from the, I guess, cliche non-profit organization, which is the case of Amnesty International. And within this foundation, things work better. I
Okay.
started working. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you
No
can
more common enemy.
no, no more economy. You can see that money talks. I mean, whenever there's, like a money, like clearly assigned to one objective, that objective is basically delivered, which is the problem also with non-profits. Um, so I started working with the Mexican communities in the US in many, many cities. And from there, I guess I found my passion. I really like everything. Uh, I mean, not only from their stories, but the way also then and then reflects a lot on societies and on the economy, because that is the case of Mexico, the US. I mean, it's directly entrenched into the migration corridor,
Hmm.
etc. And from there, anyways, I ended up working in government because the foundation kind of sort of, it wasn't my decision. It took the turn into the public sphere. I really like working for my boss. He asked me to follow him, basically. I didn't want to at the beginning, but honestly, he was a very good boss, so I followed. Then I ended up in exactly in public. And long story short, I ended up trying to understand private better. And that's why I ended up here in France pursuing a master's in HEC Paris, École de Commerce in the business school, because after working for nonprofits and working for public, I realized the gigantic gap that there is when communicating these three sectors, and the way that I understood the leaf was business. So I ended up
Hmm.
doing my master's there and finally achieved what I think is the best balance of of trying to bridge that gap, which is working for an institute focused on human rights and business. But that's my long story short. A bit long,
That,
sorry.
no, I think it was great, and I I realized that I have never thought about the fact that most of us just only choose one stakeholder, either being in a public sector, private sector, or ONG. So it's very interesting that you have been trying to merge the three things. Have you and so you are thinking you have been able to do it, uh, and I guess you're kind of doing it in your everyday job. How does that look like?
Honestly, with the institute, okay, I'm gonna give the blessing to the audience listening because it's a complex task to explain it. The thing is, there's a difference between there's this other organization that I
Yeah.
think it's a very good way to compare what we do and what um, I mean human rights organizations do for businesses, which is called BSR. It's business and social responsibility, if I'm not mistaken. And I think they also started here in France. We have worked together in some things, in webinars,
Hmm.
we're constantly touching on each other. But the thing is that BSI works as a consultancy. So they do work for businesses. They receive a case and they try to solve it. The Institute, uh, IHRB, I mean, we're not for business, we are human rights and business, meaning we do not work for companies. Um, we work, I mean, the best way to describe the work is as a think do tank. So that's why I wanted to give the blessing to an audience because there's luck understanding that. But we do receive the money. I mean, the business model is non-profit, meaning we do not get paid by businesses. We rely on other such as grants that are commonly given to non-profit organizations for human rights. But we work with businesses to try to tackle like the main or actually niche human rights issues that are commonly found in businesses around the world. In the case of migrant workers, it's the fate of migrant workers in supply chains. So I'm not talking about irregular migration, but about the migrants, the migrant labor force that is needed in most supply chains around the world, and who are more 3 times more vulnerable to get their human rights violated than non-migrant workers.
What is the difference between a migrant worker in supply chain and a migrant worker?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I say supply chain because that's the business challenge when it comes to protecting the migrant workers. So Um, I mean, the business and their policies or the way business are structured are not to exploit their labor force. But when a supply chain becomes lengthy, when you have a global supply chain, like within shipping, or I don't know, any big businesses that have global, um, I guess, activities, the subcontractor relationships in other countries becomes complex to manage, basically, to oversee and to audit. And then is when you have, for example, I think the easiest case to understand is cruise ships and tourism. where you have a cruise ship line from Germany operating in the Caribbean with most of its employees coming from Malaysia that were hired from an agency also in France. Who has the verdict? I mean, who is really able to supervise and to regulate like living conditions or the working conditions of these Malaysian workers that ended up in this cruise ship line? It's Olympic supply chain. So it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that there's something illegal within the operation. It's a company hiring an agency, hiring labor force, but there are a lot of cracks in the system in which a Malaysian, just an example, and again, the second example, it's exploited while working in a cruise ship.
Okay. And when you're talking about this workforce, are you focusing only on the legal migrants or also illegal migrants that are part of the supply chain, but maybe they're not counted on?
Because we work with businesses, we have to stay with with the leverage power of the business, which is regular migrants, which are temporary working forces, which are often seen in agriculture and then again shipping, and funny enough, are gonna be more and more seen in. I mean, because of changes of climate, of global warming, sorry, now there's this new industry. For example, it's a very interesting one that is called disaster cleanups.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we're having more disasters. I mean, because the world is not prepared for the global warming, then we're starting to see disasters in cities and not having enough labor force to clean up after those cities. So they bring this emergency because of like that workers from other countries to basically do the cleanup, and then they're returned back. But
Oh,
they're exploited because of these activities. So yeah, to answer that question, it's the migrants that are hired by a company, and the company probably doesn't know that they are exploiting them here.
I see. And maybe you can dive a little bit. You mentioned earlier that the corridor between North America of migrants is one of the most important ones in the world. What is the type of work or projects that you are currently doing at the IHRB?
Imagine saying IHRB in Spanish, it's impossible, by the way. I'm actually have these conversations in English because every time I try to talk about it in Mexico, it's like, "Saya IHRB," it's hard. But anyway, I carry as the Mexico, US coordinator, and Canada is easy to trade. Uh, Also because of its history. So as I mentioned, I mean, it's the biggest migration corridor, meaning it's the corridor in which the most amount of migrants come from the very same place origin and end up in the very same country of destination, the US.
Yeah.
And the most established case, meaning the regular migration, temporary workers hired by companies case, it's in agriculture. But
Mm.
there's a special visa actually that relies, of course, it depends on the employment for the migrants that is given to this agricultural workforce. There is not a pathway towards citizenship, so it's basically built for labor force to come in and go out of the country whenever they're needed for the crops recollections. More than 90% of the visa recipients are men, of course, though there is female working force in the field, but it only means that these are irregular migrants, which only means that they're probably having like human rights even more violated. But anyways,
Mhm.
um, nurse is given to men, nurse is given to Mexican men. And also, just as this is the human rights challenge I guess. Recently, I think in the last decade, the most amount of human trafficked victims that came out of train that they were trafficked were these visa recipients. So Mexicans working in the US, hired by companies, suffers from some sort of violation in which they ended up being trafficked and
Mhm.
exploited. Um, so yeah, it's the U.S. agricultural workforce relying, well, agricultural business or industry relying on Mexican workforce, temporary Mexican workforce. But that's a clear case because has been the most established. It's also the most improved during the time, but You can see Mexicans working irregularly and regularly in various industries in the USA. They do have a labor um, scarcity, and it's not improving.
Hmm.
Regardless of what Mr. Trump is saying, numbers are not there. I mean, if they want to sustain their economy, they need yes or yes migrant workers, and historically, the labor force suppliers of that working force is Mexico.
How do you think the Trump administration have shaped your work on the day to day? Do you really feel that before him joining the administration, you were focused on one thing, and now with the new administration, you're doing something else?
The new administration, what did hit uh, is the industry, or I guess that I'm working on, which is the nonprofit for development. So with the closing of the USAID and also the cutting of funds to international organizations like for development, like IOM, International Organization for Migration, ILO, International Labor Organizations, which are organizations that touch on my work directly because these are like the international standards to protect migrant workers in supply chains. Yeah, I mean, there was a rock in the boat. IOM had to hire thousands of people, such as the case of ILO, and of course that within these organizations, all the programs that had to do with the protection of migrant workers were the first ones to suffer.
Hmm.
Uh, so in that case, I mean, in that sector, you should see you can feel definitely. But for the time being, for example, in Colombia, Colombia was or yeah, was the country in Latin America that relied the most on USAID. So a lot of organizations ended up being bankrupt and indebted because they have paid for their programs, which they were supposed to receive the money from USAID, and then USAID like went completely off thanks to Elon Musk. Thank you. Um, yeah. So yeah, in that sense,
Hmm.
the things definitely are hard. We'll see how things develop. But then again, in the Mexico US case, I mean, here's a difference between, let's say, political animal, which I think fits in well,
Hmm.
and then Trump having to sustain the largest economy in the world. And for the latter, he does rely on it, like he does with it. Then again, that it's impossible for the US to sustain
Hmm.
themselves without Mexican loyal force. Um, so to address your question, for example, it's good and it's bad for some of the organizations working or trying to work in the while I mean the best way to simplify this is one my favorite recruitment agency of migrant workers
Yeah.
in that I have discovered in the North American corridor. It's called Cierto. They actually started in the US by a Mexican guy, very cool one. His name is Joe Martinez. And Joe Martinez has been able to basically do the best model for recruiting workers, um, also training them, sending them, and then following on their way back to their communities of origin because
Yeah.
it's in these dynamics where where human rights get violated. In the case of Joe Martinez and Cierto, when this administration kicked in, cutting funds all around for nonprofits, especially for these organizations that rely on nonprofit, and international. Cierto did good. Cierto did good in the sense that businesses that have worked with Cierto that have already assimilated uh, his services, I mean, Cierto services, actually can clear, like, sat with him on the table asking him what does he need uh, to grow, basically. So, like business kind of got scared in the case that CLFO relied on any sort of funding from the national development funds, and they were there to attempt to collect that emergency in case it arrives. It wasn't the case of Cierto. Cierto is sustainable. Now it has businesses backing him up or backing them up.
Okay.
Yeah. But in the case of other organizations that were, I don't know, let's say focus on research, and so they will, yeah. And I'll just use an example. Yeah, research and the impact of the migrant workers and their exclusion from their market, to call it like that. I mean, this These organizations, I do think they definitely suffer. So it depends on the model of the organizations, I guess.
It,
But yeah, Trump, I mean, the US needs us, and they need a good labor force, not an exploited one.
it sounds very challenging, especially the message you're saying that there's a need for migrants, and but at the same time, there is a mentality of a bad stigma to them.
Yeah, now it's a challenge around the world. Well, I
Uh,
mean, the
mhm,
Mexico, the North American case is the big one, but it's the global north, the way it describes rich countries, they do have that demographic crisis. I mean, they're not going to be able to sustain themselves without foreign labor force. It's around
mhm.
Europe and the US.
We will be right back.
Hey, SASI graduate. Have you just wrapped up an amazing project? Or working on one that deserves more than a LinkedIn post? Share it with us on the next season of Keeping Up with the Sussies. Fill out the form in the show notes and let your story inspire our community.
Back to the show.
I actually got a chance to read your article on the Trump administration and business rights for and responsible business in Mexico. And why did you think this story had to be told?
I mean, the interesting case in Mexico that actually was triggered in the first Trump administration is the case of nearshoring. So in the first Trump administration, yeah, probably everyone remembers, but especially up in North America, Trump saying it's the Chinese, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was talking badly about Mexicans, but even worse, I would say about Chinese. And then you had COVID, uh, and and supply chains being interrupted around the world. So also at the combo of Trump being against the Chinese and supply chains being interrupted, and Chinese not being able to deliver their goods anymore. Then you had finally Mexico jumping into the first place of being the first economic partner for the US, because before that, I think it was like for a decade or a bit more, it was with China, and you had Mexico in the second or third place. But then after COVID, you had Mexico being number one, and that triggered this sort of um, domino effect into companies looking at Mexico and investing in Mexico. You shorten the supply chain, you have a surplus of labor force then again, um, and also with these new regulations on sustainable practices. I mean, it represents less or decreasing your CO2 emissions because you're shortening the supply chain. And Mexico became very attractive for a lot of global companies that
Hmm.
used to invest in China to invest in Mexico, basically. Uh, there are plenty of examples, and includes then again Elon Musk. I don't know what happened there at the end, and economizing or investing in the largest Tesla factory in the US. You had Lego also investing in
Hmm.
the largest Lego factory in Mexico. Everything in the southern border, in the south, no, sorry, in the northern border, in Mexico, which is also like industrial territories of Mexico. But the human rights case in Mexico is a mess. It has been also for the last decade. Corruption all around, violence also triggered by drug cartels, but still, and this is a way that I always describe Mexico, it seems to be like one-legged man that always runs properly. So
Hmm.
regardless of having violence all around, corruption all across, the economy is steady. We are still number one partners of the largest economy in the world. We are hosting, like these international sporting events. It still somehow managed to become or to be very attractive for investment because of the return of investment, actually. So that's not unknown, but that's what I mean by it's like a one-leg man that runs property. Because because maybe it shouldn't. I mean, um, because of the human rights violations, because that's how it works.
Yeah.
But now with these large investments, um, I mean, because of the current state, which only adds to the complexity of the political state and the political landscape of Paris and the jobs crossing of the gangs. It's important for businesses. I mean, it's not only important, but it's gonna be essential for businesses to be able
Mm-hmm.
to operate responsibly there. Not only because there's that human responsibility to an ethical responsibility, but because of the complexity, custom conflicts can be catastrophic if they don't do it right. If they go and interrupt a region that is basically, I don't know, we have seen the last 5 years, I guess, toque de queda. I don't know how to say that in English.
Curfew. Curfew.
Curfews, yeah,
Yeah.
curfews because of violence, because people cannot go out on the streets. I mean, that's direct interruption of your operations. So yeah, businesses are gonna have to understand the context and also have to be willing to mitigate these cases to operate properly.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
guess that's too much.
I think I honestly, well, I'm Mexican, so you touch upon many things that I remember on that article and how all the challenges that region is facing. Well, while reading your article, I saw that you point out to two crucial aspects. One, that it's going to be less crossings, and on the other side, that the Trump administration wants more deportations. So you argue that this situation will make a floating population in the north of Mexico that's going to be there. Do you really think that they can be integrated into the labor force in society? How do you think it's going to work out? Would they be able to go back to even their places of origin?
In this humanitarian catastrophe, I guess, you are talking about irregular migration. So the thing is, also in the last years, last decade, the irregular migration from Mexico has decreased, while the Central American and also Haiti and also Asian population crossing through Mexico has decreased, increased. Uh, the problem with that and the political relationship is that during the first Trump administration, I don't know if it's going to be reinstated. I wouldn't be surprised because of Trump's, and commonly threats with tariffs. There was this program named Stay in Mexico, which basically agreed on having all the deportees stay in Mexico. There a lot of those deportees, because of irregular migration, were Mexicans. Then again, frontier cities that have been functioning because Tijuana is also a rich, they do have a lot of money. Have been good when assimilating foreigners into the city, into the economy, into the formal and informal economy, because we have also to remember that Mexico, I think more than 50% of its economy is informal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very interesting case, but I think it touched a lot on your question, because in the case of Mexico, a lot of Latin American countries, when it comes to migration, when economy, there's a lot of lines that are very blurry, because it's informal and it's formal, it's irregular and it's regular, it's all the same, because that's how the country runs. And again, this one-leg man running. So it definitely points towards human rights violations. Talking about the downside of Mexico, I'm stepping on Mexico, and this was years ago. I think it was in 2011 when I read the stat of women migrants that before they go into the trip, I guess, they do implant themselves with contraceptives because they know it's gonna be something that will happen. As a woman migrant, why would you do that trip by yourself? Go with a caravan. And these northern cities, then again, are rich and having gone historically when assimilated migrants, uh, they, it's also very messy. Like corruption is all around, violence is all around. Of course, that drug cartel because it's also the northern border. Well, drugs are fighting the plazas or the cities across the border all the time.
Yeah.
Uh, so then again, I mean, there are a lot of red flags, I guess, when it comes to probably future exponential human rights violations, because let's not forget that also drug cartels touch into every sort of illegal business, including human trafficking. Oh, meaning more migrants, probably.
Very harsh and complex situation you outlook, and I really appreciate for you telling us the situation there. Especially, I had no idea that having a caravan, migration caravan, it was meant for safe purposes. I always thought when I saw on the news that crossing alone might be easier because you would have less chance to be detained, but I think it really showcases how complex the situation is.
No, yeah. I mean, then again, culture in Mexican economy, the formal and the formal, you also have the illegal economy, which means drug cartels functioning all around, and drug cartels move a lot of things across the country, including migrants with human trafficking. That's why they also have to protect themselves to caravans. But I mean, retouching on the business case, the thing is, let's say we're gonna have this surplus of irregular migrants, not from Mexico, being deported to the northern border, which is not only I mean, I'm not talking only about the cities, but also about these future nearshoring investments in the companies.
Yeah.
They're gonna need a lot of labor force also. Of course, that everyone is gonna look for the cheapest labor force when they're probably gonna be migrants deported from other countries that are not from Mexico doing those jobs.
You have this situation where you have a huge inflow of people who are willing to work to survive. As a business owner or an HR team, how do you manage the challenge of recruiting?
So where we work a lot from in the institute in IHIB is the fact that promoting responsible recruitment, because it's a way for businesses to promote that across the supply chain, from training, not necessarily from restricting or ending up at this, like finishing or threatening to finish a business relationship more than training across. In the case of responsible recruitment, we talk a lot, or in the institute, we have this principle that was born, I think, more than 10 years ago, was 9 years ago now, that it's the employer pays principle. It basically states how, like an employer shouldn't pay for the job, but also a company should absorb that cost. I know it sounds simple for people that are, white collars like us, in which we will never think about paying for getting a job, but it's not the case of migrant workers, in which they do pay to people, they do pay to agencies, they do pay to family members even sometimes to get a job. So it's a matter of businesses making sure that when they are reaching out to the subcontractors, to the agencies, they have policies, and also acknowledge how these policies are implemented, on the fact that an employer that arrived to X or Y factory didn't pay any fee to get that spot. The employer pays principle sounds simple, but of course it's complex then again. And there are many tools for fair and responsible recruitment. That it's not about necessarily reinventing the wheel, but it's about ticking the right boxes and making sure that they all have the documents, making sure that they didn't get paid. They didn't, absorb any of the cost of recruitment. If they're coming from another place, also making sure that they didn't do this in another place, or that they're living that they have respectable living conditions, etc. So honestly, it's a matter of ticking the right boxes in the relationships of subcontractors across. And then again, it's not impossible. It can be a very simple exercise. It is a matter of acknowledging which
Hmm.
boxes have to be ticked.
And I would just like to wrap up on all the projects and activities that you're involved on. I think there is one that I've seen you are quite spoken about on online, which is the Global Forum for Responsible Recruitment of Migrant Workers. Could you tell me about the challenges of being the coordinator of this forum? Share with me some of the speakers that you have really wanted to get them to listen to them and share their experience. And why do you think it's important to do this forum?
Yeah, the Global Fund for Responsible Recruitment, in my opinion, so I'm completely biased because I'm also the one who manages to coordinate the forum. But I think it's the best example of how the institute can work and work. Then again, as a tank, not working for businesses but with businesses, what we're best at, I think, or I'm sure, is at bringing the proper stakeholders again into the table and being able to have the proper words, I guess, in that table conversation. So what the forum does is bringing together businesses, migrant workers, recruitment agencies, policymakers for migration, international organizations for development, and setting up to the agenda um, to talk about the challenges and the efforts and the realizations and the lessons learned that all of these stakeholders have been trying to apply for responsible recruitment. Um, we do it every year in a different region to cover also different migration corridors. It's very entertaining, but it can be hectic when you're managing a forum in Bangkok and based in Mexico. Um, but it's interesting to see how migration corridors policies across the migration policy corridors are also different. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's um, at some countries depend actually on the money that agencies bring into the economy, like the case of Nepal. And
Mm-hmm.
having agencies is completely legal to charge a fee for the employers that are bringing to other countries. And then what do you do there as a company if it's completely legal?
Mm-hmm.
These are the conversations that we trigger or we try to trigger in the forum. What I like the most about the forum is that you have, then again, touching on the caravans, there's safety among numbers. So when you have not one company, but a number of companies that are leaders within their sectors talking about the challenges that they see for mitigating labor exploitation, you have a free, open conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have, like everyone pointing at someone or you calling yourself, blaming yourself for a fault. You are acknowledging as a group of organizations that there has to be common or like efforts to tackle a problem, which is the problem of modern slavery that touches across the global economy.
Yeah.
Um, so we had my first one was in New York. We talked a lot about agriculture. Then again, that's a business case there. The second one was in London. We have a lot of businesses and also lawyers in that one. And this one, the latest, which was one of my favorites, was in Bangkok. It was one of my favorites because the Asian corridor is the one I knew the least. And we
Yeah.
had a lot of migrant workers that now work for foundations to advocate for the rights of me. But one of my favorites is this woman that she's also very nice. Her name, she's actually also French. Her name is Henriette Macul, and she works
Mm-hmm.
for I mean, in English or in Spanish, I guess we say Vinci. In French, it's Vinci, which is this
Yeah.
global, I mean, this monster infrastructure construction organization. There is none, I would dare say, you know, like a country in the world that hasn't have an airport built by Vinci. So they have a huge
Uh-huh.
supply chain. And you have Henriette uh, talking about their own development of the fair recruitment toolkit and also how she's working with OECD groups to basically give workshops on how to promote the toolkit. That one, I mean, it's one of my favorites because then again, sounds very simple, but I think she touches on a lot of the key points then again of the right boxes that need to be ticked for businesses and other stakeholders that touch on business to make sure that there is no labor exploitation.
Yeah.
That's what the forum, long story short, is
I think
about.
it's a I think it's a very interesting space to be at. And I understand how you were able to organize a forum in London or New York. How did you manage to make it through the language barrier or culture barrier to make a forum in Bangkok?
Oh my God, it has a lot to do with, honestly, this is a lesson that that organizations in global north need to understand. And that what is that working with teams for production, any vessel production of event or scanning or videographers, whatever, in countries that are not recognized as the global north is the best thing you can do because I mean they don't only have the knowledge and the language. No, yeah, they have the language, the knowledge, and the numbers.
Okay.
Because I mean, touching again on because it's the state of the global economy, was you have an American team working with 3 people to leverage a 2-day event. When you go to Thailand and touch on the right team, you have 20 people doing the thing 20 times better because you have 20 people doing it. So, or all global organizations organizing events. I know this is a little bit off topic, but please just reach out to organizations that are from the country. Stop bringing 2 videographers from, honestly, I don't know. I'm just saying from New York.
Yeah.
You're paying. I mean, you could be paying for 20 people to do a job way better than 2 videographers. Yeah.
Well, congrats on that. I maybe the next one will be closer to home, but uh,
Yes.
it's very interesting. Um, well, maybe just diving into how you have felt in your career and how happy you are with it. You are working something you're passionate about, but do you do you have fun with it? How do you manage to keep an optimistic life when we normally hear on the media that human rights are either violated or that human rights are at risk?
Uh, I'm gonna sound like a complete opposite from an optimist with this, but I really think so. If you want to work for a non-profit organization, you go, you try, but first of all, don't do it for the money. First of all, I mean, do not lose sight by the fact that you're working for a non-profit,
Yeah.
because that definitely looks discouraging when you're tired. But I'm saying this not because of it's my case, but a lot of times you do see people getting desperate and uh, and desperate to actually ship out in non-profit organizations, which makes sense. We all have our priorities. But that's the first advice for anyone. I mean, you have to be clear on that because then you have to be honest. And then, I mean, and this to say that I think, but I don't know how much I'm romanticizing myself. I'm playing myself on a pedestal here. I hope not, or it's too early. That I mean, I wouldn't be able. I went to a business school to basically stop working for nonprofits because though I was before in the public administration, my job was to reach out to nonprofits to bring their expertise into the policy work, and I ended up
Yeah,
in another nonprofit. I
but
guess
I
I
like
wanna,
it.
and I do like it. I do like it. I think most people or all people in IHRB are driven by purpose. To be honest, like you cannot not do it to call it like that. The tricky part is it's easy to overwork yourself because then you're. I mean, I wish I sometimes we have someone next to me that's completely opposite. That is I don't know the asset manager of private equity that ticks in and ticks out from 9 to 6, and that's it. As a reminder of work is work. That's
Hmm.
sad because I also think we're in the non-profit and people that are mainly or solely driven by purpose. We ourselves. It's easy to overwork yourself because you are there for for a several purpose or for your own purpose or for a purpose, not for the money also. So at the end of the day, it's work. And yeah, I mean, the issues that we're trying to tackle are global, are always going to be there. Conflict is inherent from human nature. Um, so it's exhausting, and not only because of the work. I mean, because it's easy for you to overwork yourself, but because, as you say, sometimes you seem to feel some progress, and then you have someone like Elon Musk coming and take the things back by 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
But you cannot not do it, because really, I feel you feel it. It's like either you keep going, or you're gonna have Elon Musk turning things back in not like 20 but 50 years. So might as well, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. So it's not really optimistic as a day, but it is what it is. And winning the purpose, I mean, you're doing because enjoy yourself. It will be hard for me to dedicate so many hours in my week to something I do not see a purpose in. But then again, I also wish I had someone like this, a quickie manager sitting right next to me, letting me know, yeah, like live your life. So that it's not only about doing something for someone else. In the case of the asset manager, giving money to someone else. In my case, it's like you also have to be able to own their money. That's the tricky part.
Is it you who is always like that, who likes to go the extra mile into something are that you care, or is it just because you really, really care and it's your passion, the work you're doing?
You know what? It's funny working with so many Europeans because though, yeah, most of them are like equally driven by purpose, etc., passion, and are willing to give the extra mile or whatever. Unlike us Mexicans, because we're also really good at this, they have a better way of doing their boundaries and limits. We don't now. We don't. Let's not forget that in the OECD countries were the country that were the most of powers. And I also come from a family in which your value comes from your working hours, basically. So it's something that I'm learning from Europeans more and more, in which put a limit into your work life for balance.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would like to say that none of them, very much European, are bothered by giving this extra mile. Not at all. Because then again, we are all there because I mean you sign up for it. It's literally your passion. I think.
That's an interesting take. And so, how do you manage to relax? Are you able to squeeze in any hobbies?
In Paris it's tricky, yeah. I run. Yeah, in Paris it's tricky. In Paris it's tricky. I run. I go to cafes. Thank God I have friends to grab a glass of wine. In Mexico, it was easier because it's cheaper. I really like the water sports. So whenever I could try something new, I would be there for sure. I
Mm-hmm.
just learned how to surf and also how to wing foil, which is an amazing sport. I guess it's the uh, city non-city contrast life that I've been seeing. So in Paris, we have the city life, which is fun. I love going to concerts and drinking with my friends. In Mexico, it was more like let's discover a next water sport. I was more active, I guess. Less chic, more sporty.
You have practiced free diving. You're the only person I know that's doing this. What it is, first of all.
I, I absolutely love it. So free diving is the cheapest way to do scuba diving. And you can go even deeper. So for any water lovers out there, it's basically trying to reach the most amount of meters in depth in the water. That's it. It sounds tough. It's not that tough. The best way to exemplify this is hold your breath while you're working, and every step equivalates to one of your, how to go flips
Mhm.
underwater going down. And every second equivalates to a meter. So if you're able to hold your breath and walk for 30 seconds while giving 30 steps, that equivalates to 30 meters. The tricky part is going out of those 30 meters because then 30 seconds turn into 60 seconds. But you basically reach out 30 minutes underwater and 30 minutes out. There are other technical aspects, of course, because the pressure of the water is something that you have to manage underwater.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very, very good exercise to relax. I think it's like the ultimate yoga experience in which you have to manage, like respiration. You have to be conscious of yourself and nothing else. Really keep in one goal, and that's it. And in Mexico, it's super easy to practice because they have cenotes.
Uh-huh.
But in salty water, it's harder to go deep because the density of the water pushes you up. But in the cenotes, to everyone who don't know it, you have to go and see them by yourselves. I'm also from that region of the cenotes, so I'm from Cancun. And the cenotes were born because, when the dinosaurs were killed by a meteorite, well, it fell into that region. So that region basically like is filled with holes because of that meteorite and you have hundreds and hundreds of cenotes, which are these holes of fresh water. So it's perfect for free diving because you have these gigantic 120-meter holes of fresh water to dive in and to practice free diving. And I think that's one of the activities to go deeper with each dive. And then again, I took 2 courses with a really good free diver in Mexico for Alejandro Lemos, and in the second seminar, I guess, or workshop, I already reached exactly what I say, like 30 meters
Wow.
down, and yeah, but I do recommend. If you want to relax and focus, try it.
Sounds very impressive. And when did you started doing this? Like, did it count like when you were playing at the pool with your brothers of who could hold its breath the longest? Or when did you actually said like, yeah, this is my sport?
We were First of all, I think that's a challenge that we all children that were born right next to the water do play as children. Like, who can
Uh,
hold more? But to touch on a cliche, I decided to do my first workshop after a breakup. When you're desperate to find somewhere to put your mind that it's not an ex relationship, and I found free writing, and it's great for that. If you're going through a breakup, consider it because then again, it's also not expensive. There, it's very cheap. It can
mhm.
be really cheap. So yeah, I've always loved the water. People that are born, I think, next to the sea would always need the water next to them, if that makes sense. And free diving is that easy or non-expensive, but to explore water in a different way also. You're not relying on anything but yourself. So it's great. It's only you and the water, nothing else.
That's I think I'll try it, but I'm sure I will never make it to 30 minutes, 30-meter land. But
Just try the
you're
exercise
you're
outside the
trying to
water.
you're convincing me.
Yeah.
But it definitely sounds dangerous, but at the same time relaxing.
No, yeah, super. Honestly, super relaxing.
We're about to come to the end of our conversation, and I just wanted to hear from you. What do you think the future has in mind for you? At least I see that I heard from this conversation at your work, you're living a very challenging time. Uh, do you think you'll keep working in migration? Is Paris the only place you want to migrate? Maybe you want to go somewhere else.
Hmm. Yeah, good question. I do get the thoughts that I like to think we all get uh, in our working lives, in which the grass always seems to look greener on the other side. Maybe touching back into this asset manager is considering every now and then what it's like to work in an NGO, and me the other way around, not as an asset manager because I wouldn't be able to do this, but in a private large corporation in which I'm able to pick in my hours and pick out. So sometimes I do think about, maybe reaching out for something that gives me more sense of stability. Because when I get touching on USA and Elon Musk, and you can see people you knew, friends losing their jobs, you do put things into
Mhm.
perspective. Like in the future, I do think sometimes more stability will be nice. And then I you're rethinking about the OECD or these international organizations. But for the time being, I mean, we're also looking at, as an example, OECD work or my job in this think do task. Now I mean, I'm way more excited right now about my current job. But yeah, sometimes I like to think what's more stability will be nice. We'll see. But for now, at least 5 more years in my HRV, I would definitely love it because there are also a lot of changes inside. And the good thing about small organizations is that you can be very entrepreneurial about your work. It gives you a lot of freedom.
Hmm.
Yeah. And about where to live, I mean, I landed in Paris because of the Masters, and I'm happy to have built here very good friends. So I'm really happy to be here for a couple, let's say 2 years. Let's say and let's see. Yes. But if I could show an ideal life, it really, I feel like what boys in the US from Latin something say here, which is 6 months here and 6 months there in Mexico, always
Hmm.
pursuing summer will be my ideal life. So I can have my shitty life here in summer and my water sports life in winter in Mexico. That will be my and also achievable with IHRB. That's why I also like the message.
Honestly, that's an envy of a work-life balance. It has been great to have you on this first episode of the podcast. I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to talk to me, and we definitely learned a lot of things, and we wish you the best, and I especially wish you to keep uh exceeding on what you're doing. I think it's a very interesting topic on what they're working on, and it's definitely something that there has been a spotlight lately.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Pablo. It was a pleasure. I mean, anytime you want to talk about any of the work of the Institute, please reach out. We're doing very interesting stuff, not only on
Yes.
my job.
And last question. If anyone wants to reach to you, where is the best place to reach out?
Yeah, either on LinkedIn, look for me as Carmen Pedraza, or I'll be happy to receive any email in my corporate, in my IHB email, which is carmen.pedraza, like my last name, at ihrb.org.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. We'll see you next time. The content here is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and do not reflect the views of any organization. Listener discretion is advised. This show may contain sensitive topics or strong language. Use the information at your own risk.